Hi, shalom everybody. Live from the Galilee, and I'm going out for a walk, but a much more restricted walk, 300 feet or 100 yards. So my walk is going to be a little bit of a back and forth walk today. Hi everybody, hope you can hear all right. Right, and in terms of car driving, you're technically only allowed to be going to and from places of necessity, which would mean either a health clinic, pharmacy, food store. And when you're in a car, you can only be 2 people maximum in the car. And if you get caught, you can get charged a 500 shekel fine. It's over $100 US, well more than $100 US, and or a suspended jail sentence. So I think that's going to be mostly enforced in the big cities. Not too many police up here in the general anyway, but people are taking it seriously. You can see really nobody out on the street. Just me out for my little walk. It's a beautiful sunshiny day in Israel, especially up here in the Galilee. I took the time to do a little bit of laundry. It's all dried very quickly on the line. We're getting closer towards sunset, about an hour away here. So I hope everybody else is doing okay, sheltering in place. I know a lot of our supporters are baby boomers plus, and you're all sheltering in place, so really take it seriously. Just in terms of updates of numbers, we have our 5th person has passed away because of the virus. I think this might be 100 meters. I'm going to turn around and go the other way. Oops. Alright. Hi Suzanne. How's everything in Toronto? And Karen, good to see you. As I said, there are about over 2,000 people infected, and the 5th person has passed away. Elderly people who have pre-existing conditions, but it's a tragedy nonetheless. Just to put those numbers in perspective, they sound very small, but compared to, say, the United States, I did a calculation, our population is about, or the American population is about over 47 times greater than ours is. So on a per capita basis, if you take our 2,000 infected, it's we're over 2,000, over 95,000 people, comparable to the United States, which is at about half that number. On the other hand, if you multiply out the number of people who passed away compared to the number of people who passed away in America, we're about 2/3 that number. So per capita, the tragedies of people dying are better here, whatever that means. Here's a beautiful view of the valley. You can see the crops are coming in. Nature's growing, nature's all continuing. Kadosh Baruch Hu's land is blossoming, growing, not stopping for the virus, but everything else is. It's an interesting lesson to take. So the testing has been increased. More people are being tested. But it's the economic restrictions. All businesses actually, except for those providing essentials like food, gasoline, banks, medical, pharmacies, have been asked to close. The unemployment rate has shot up to 20% since this started a few weeks ago, from 4%. There are over 800,000 people unemployed, going to be close to 1 million very shortly. And even though we have a lot of bickering going on in trying to form a government, the government still tends to function, and especially during Passover, so many families need financial help for Passover, being out of work and not having collected paychecks. The government is definitely before Passover going to be distributing funds to independent business owners and that are basically not earning any income in most cases. And those checks will definitely, I'm sure, be going up before Passover. Government can't do anything other than that. Hi, Sam. You're watching from Indiana. People here are observing. Yeah, okay, it's great that you're all sheltering in place. But I also noticed in America that you're also starting to talk about freeing up the economy by testing people who've had the virus or young people and getting them back into the workforce. So we've been talking about that here for a week now, and but I see President Trump's picked up on that too, and it definitely is not sustainable. So that's what's going on now. Interestingly enough, we are one of the few businesses in the country that are allowed to be open and still are open. Why? Because we are totally 100% online, and we don't interact physically with any customers. We don't deal with any customers in Israel. Everything that we do with respect to our olive oil is shipped out of the country. The post office is still working, who pick up the parcels. Maybe tomorrow I'll take a picture of the post office coming to pick up all your parcels. So we're one of the few ways, if you want to tangibly help the economy, we're one of the few ways you can actually do it from wherever you are around the world. If you order the olive oil, you'll be helping the families that we support. You'll be helping the workers in the post office who are keeping at work, and our suppliers. So that's one thing you can do. Just go to GalileeGreen.com, order some olive oil. That would be a real big help, especially before Passover. Yeah. And about Passover, everybody's thinking about physically what they're going to be doing. And there's lots of food. There's not going to be a shortage of food. Everybody will have it. The problem is going to be organizing Passover Seders. I'm sure many of you are concerned and thinking about the same thing, but not being able to get together as families. It's a complex issue. Sorry about the wind. I hope it's not making it too hard to hear me. I'll get closer to the phone and away from the wind here. 1 second. Yeah, I wanted to say a few things about Passover and some thoughts you might not have heard. When Moses escaped from Egypt, ran away from Egypt when he was under threat of being killed by Paro, and he ran off to Midian, and he met Tzipporah at the well, and Yitro, and ended up marrying Tzipporah. Before he left Yitro's house and went back to Egypt, Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty, spoke to Moses through prophecy. He said something very interesting at the very beginning, just before he says to him to go back to Egypt. I think I might be more than 100 meters, but the view's too beautiful here not to go the extra few meters to take a look. Look at how crystal clear it is. It's Jordan in the distance. God said to Moses, he says, I want you're going to take the staff, and our midrashim say that this is the special staff that all the way from Adam Rishon, Adam, was passed down through Noach to Noah, all the way down through Yosef, down to Moses. says, you're going to take your staff, you're going to do these signs and wonders. And he says, and I want you to say to Paro this particular phrase. And the phrase is, B'ni Bechori Yisrael. Say to Paro that B'ni, my son, Bechori, my firstborn, is Yisrael. And I want you to let him come and serve me. And if you don't, I'm going to kill your firstborn. Meaning God tells Moses to tell Paro, my firstborn is Israel. And if you don't let me have my firstborn, I'm going to take away your firstborn. Go back and read it in the book of Exodus. Now, what's fascinating about this, I just noticed that this year I've been asking some of my rabbi colleague friends. Moses never does this. He never says it. It's not recorded in the Chumash. It's not recorded at all in the book of Exodus. He never says to Paro, B'ni Bechori Yisrael. Go and take a look on your own and see all the different words that he uses. He calls us the Ivrim, the Hebrews. He doesn't say B'ni Bechori Yisrael, my son, my firstborn Israel. Even when the plague of the firstborn happens, he doesn't say it. So that's something for you to think about. The question is, what is this idea of the Bechor? Last Passover, I happened to be in Detroit with my daughter and her family, and I picked up, my son-in-law had Rabbi Jonathan Sachs's book about Passover, where he discusses this issue related to Passover at length, the concept of the Bechor, the firstborn. But this concept of the firstborn runs through the entire Torah, and particularly with the Jewish people. And what's interesting about the firstborn is in most cases the firstborn doesn't end up being the firstborn. Did you notice that? Who was Abraham's firstborn, technically? Anybody out there? Tell me in the comments. No, it's too hard to read here. Hi, Joyce. Actually, the first one who's born to Abraham is Ishmael. That's right, because he was born to Hagar before. Let these little boys go by and keep them six feet away. Dalat Amot. Mirchak. Right. Ishmael was born first, but he didn't become the Bechor. The Bechor does not mean firstborn. We have to see what Bechor means. Yitzchak actually becomes the Bechor. And then Yitzchak has two sons, Esav and Yaakov. Who's born first? Esav. He's born first, and technically should be the firstborn, the Bechor. But he gives up his rights to the firstborn, right? He sells it. He sells it to Yaakov. And Yaakov buys his firstborn rights, the rights to be the firstborn, and technically the obligation. We'll talk about that in a second. And he becomes the firstborn. Interesting. When it comes down to Yisrael, to Yaakov, also becomes complicated about the firstborn. It becomes a real mess, because he originally wants to marry Rachel first. Then there's the switcheroo. So the firstborn technically becomes Reuven, but then that gets messed up during the sale of the brothers. Yehuda takes over from that side, from Leah's sons, but really the firstborn technically should have been whom? The firstborn son of Rachel, who was Yosef. Right, who does technically have certain firstborn rights. This is our house right here, so I'm within 100 meters. firstborn rights. And actually, sorry, lost connection there for a second. So Joseph, as the firstborn, one of the things that the firstborn, listen, I got this problem. I want you to be my firstborn, but technically you're not firstborn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and I'm going to elevate them to the status of full tribes. And that way, when we divide up the land, you're going to get a double portion, one for Ephraim and one for Manasseh. That's how he works that out. But I want to share a little bit of an idea about what really means to be the firstborn, and what it means that Israel is God's firstborn. It's hard for me to see all your comments. I'm going to have to answer them later when I finish the walk. So, the firstborn is the eldest child. What is the eldest child role in the family? So the parents have certain moral core family values and things that they stand for, and goals and dreams for the family and their legacy. The eldest matures earliest and is the first one to be able to understand fully in a more adult level, certainly as a teenager, than the little kids in the family, to really understand what the family represents, who the parents are, and spiritually who they are and what they want for the family. And at an adult level, they can communicate with the adults in adult language. They can deal with the abstract concepts, intangible concepts that are important to the parents. But the firstborn is also a child, and the same generation of the rest of the children. And as one of the children, can more easily understand and communicate in the children's language, act basically as a translator, a communicator, an intermediary of taking responsibility for the will of the parents to be fulfilled by the family, because he is better suited to communicate in many respects with the siblings who haven't matured enough to be able to understand the deep abstract concepts of the parents. That's the Bechor. Now, once you understand that, it puts into place the story of Yaakov and Esav much better. I don't know, I want to share with you what was really going on. If you don't have the oral tradition to really help fill in the gaps of that story, it seems pretty criminal. Seems like Jacob is taking advantage of Esav, but really he isn't. When Yaakov is cooking his porridge, meaning the lentil soup, and Yaakov and Esav comes in from his day of hunting and pillaging, and he says, "I'm famished, give me some of that red stuff." What is that red stuff? What's going on? So our sages tell us it was the day that Abraham died. And that means if it's the day that Abraham died, that Esav and Yaakov's father is about to sit Shiva, to bury the grandfather, and the father is about to sit down in mourning. And we have a custom in Torah that the first meal is made for the mourner when they come back from the burial, and there's a tradition to have round foods on it to represent the eternity of life. Today, in modern times, if any of you have been to a shiva, you might have seen them serving boiled eggs that are round, maybe chickpeas, but the lentils are also round. So sages tell us he was cooking the meal to help console his father for his grandfather's death. Now, if you think about that, and Esav comes in and knows that, what's going on, the other thing you have to appreciate that as soon as Abraham dies, that the family legacy, the rights to the land, the covenant of the land from the Brit Ben Aptarim, the covenant of the parts that the Almighty gave the land to Abraham and his descendants, that covenant is inherited, and it gets inherited by Yitzchak. Up until that point, we see that Abraham still loved Ishmael, and maybe there was a chance that he might change his mind and give it through Ishmael. But as soon as Abraham passes away, it goes directly to Yitzchak. And who are next in line? Yaakov and Esav. That means they are next in line to the inheritance. Now, what was the whole point of the covenant? Why did God pick Abraham in the first place? Because Abraham showed the Almighty that he was prepared to dedicate his life to teach the world about the one God, the King of the universe, and teach the world about monotheism. Once Abraham says, I'm dedicating my life to that, to teach the world about the one God, then the Almighty says to him, oh, all right, go to the place I'm going to show you, go to the land, leave your father's house, leave your home, leave your country, and go to the land I'm going to show you. And that's the beginning of the story. So we see that the connection to the land is really contingent upon establishing a nation whose role it is to teach the world about God, that there's no power in the world other than God. That's the whole story. So, and that's the family business. And therefore, the connection of receiving the land is dependent upon taking responsibility to teach the world about God, and that there's no power in the world other than God. Esav comes in and says, look, there's some food. I'm hungry. And he says, give me some of that stuff. And Yaakov says, this is part of the family legacy. We're about to spiritually comfort our father for the death of our grandfather. The inheritance is coming down. It's you and me that are in line. It just seems you don't give a hang about that. So sell me your firstborn right. You don't want the responsibility of being the firstborn. You don't want the responsibility of teaching the world about God. You're only interested in eat, drink, and be merry. And Esav answers to him, what use is this firstborn rights? I'm going to die anyway. It doesn't mean he's going to die that day. It means all there is this world and the pleasures in it. So what good is it to me to keep the firstborn? That just means I got to do all this self-denial and spiritual work. I'd rather just have the porridge. I'm going to die anyway. So Yaakov says, fine. And he takes the firstborn rights. He buys it from him for what Esav feels it's worth, a bowl of soup. But it's more than just a bowl of soup. It's a disconnecting from anything that his father and grandfather stands for. So that's it. That's the firstborn rights. That's what it means to be the firstborn. To take responsibility to teach the world about the oneness of God. So now you can understand the whole conflict between Moshe and Paro. Paro thought he was God. The Jewish people have been enslaved. And they've been enslaved to the point where they see that there's no hope. There's no hope. There's no escaping the power of Paro. And God says to Moses, Paro, I want you to let the children of Israel go. They're my Bechor. I need them to fulfill the purpose that they were created for as a nation, from Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And if you don't allow them out, if you don't allow my Bechor out and the freedom to do what they were meant to do, I will kill all the Bechor in your world. But it's more than that, you see. That Paro and Egypt's whole existence and life depends upon the nation of Israel coming back to the land and doing their job and teaching them how to connect to the infinite one God, and not putting all of your hopes and building your whole society around all the material pagan gods of the world. Again, you're literally, the world is destroyed if there is no knowledge and connection with the Almighty King of the universe. That's what it means to be the Bechor. You know, everybody hates the Jewish people throughout history because we're the chosen people. Problem is, it's the actual worse, meaning anti-Semitism rises up when we forget that we're the chosen people. It's not just to understand you're the chosen people, you have to understand that we're here to bring monotheism to the world, to teach God's Torah to the world. To read God's Torah just by reading the Chumash, like I just showed you, you have no way of understanding what it's saying. There's no way. We're the Bechor. They call us the people of the book. Why are we called the people of the book? Because we're here to learn God's Torah, the Sefer Torah. But you can't learn the Sefer Torah unless you understand what the words mean. And from 3,300 years ago, at the time of the Exodus, when Moses went up for 40 days and 40 nights and then up again, what was he learning? He was learning when it says, Lo tirtzach, don't murder, what murder is. Where's justifiable homicide become murder? Are you allowed to kill the enemy when they're shooting at you in the war? Yeah, that's self-defense. What about if they take a coffee break and turn their back to you? Can you shoot the enemy in the time of war? Is that justifiable homicide? It's complicated. So to read the Torah on its own is impossible. So we have dedicated, those of us who've chosen to take our Bechor status seriously. That's why you see so many people dedicating their lives to studying the oral and the written law. Because it's complicated. As the Bechor, there's seriously complex, difficult ideas that need to be communicated. We have an obligation to learn it. And after we learn it, we have an obligation to teach it to the world in words and ways it can understand. I'll give you another example of that. Maybe I'm going to run out of time here, but I didn't get to teach this week, so I'm a little bit in teaching mode, I guess. I miss it because the school's closed. When Joshua came into the land, there's an interesting commandment that he's obliged to do in the book of Joshua. Right? It says, take these big boulders and write out the words of the Torah, be'er hetev, in a clear way, explanation. Be'er means an explanation or written clearly. Rashi, the oral Torah, teaches us, what does be'er hetev mean? In 70 languages. Wait, we got to write out the Torah as we're coming into the land. We all speak Hebrew, and we got to write it out in 70 languages. It's kind of weird. Why 70? So 70 is a euphemism in the Torah. We talk about the 70 nations. 70, when you say 70, it means a complete set, meaning so that all the languages are covered, meaning all the languages of the world. Okay. So we're coming into the land, to possess the land, the Jewish people. We've got our oral and our written Torah with us. We know what we got to do. And then God tells us, wait, write out the Sefer Torah at the border, in 70 languages. Okay, so you might think so that the nations of the world can see the Torah, and that we're a Torah nation. And then what happens is, and now cover it up with whitewash, with seed. Wait a second. We're writing out the Torah in all the different languages, and then, after we did that, now you got to cover it up. So what's going on? I write it out in 70 languages so the nations can see it, but now we're going to cover it over so they can't see it? Anybody noticed that before? Kind of weird. Well, you wouldn't know that we had to write it out with 70 languages without the oral Torah. You just say, you got to write it out. So you'd think they're writing it out in Hebrew. All right. So what's the implication? Here's my thought. The reason why we're writing it out in 70 languages is for us, not for the nations of the world. We're writing it out for us in 70 languages. There's another halacha. Before you can sit on the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Court, says there are prerequisites to be a judge. One of the prerequisites, you got to know 70 languages. Whoa. So there's an argument within the oral Torah. Does that mean each judge has to know 70 languages? That's a lot. Or that the full complement of the 120 judges on the Sanhedrin, they can cover all the languages, which makes more sense to me. Why is that important? Because in order to hold a case, you have to hear from the litigants and from the witnesses. And in order to do that, you have to allow them to express themselves and to be able to understand what's going on in their own language. So the judges have to know the languages so they can speak to the witnesses without interpreters, and that the litigants can understand what's going on from the judges in their own language. Makes sense? So if what we're saying is true, that B'ni Bechor Yisrael, that Israel is the Bechor, that means the nations of the world are our brothers and sisters. They're our younger siblings. And then again, the same point that I made earlier, we have to learn everything that God wants from us, wants from the world, in all of its confusing, subtle detail. That's our job. But it's not enough for us to learn what God wants and for us to do what we're supposed to do. Humanity is all in this together. We're all from Adam. We're all from Adam Harishon. Remember that staff I was talking about earlier that we've inherited? Goes all the way to Adam Harishon. We're just here to fix the mistake of Adam Harishon, Adam and Chava, who got mixed up and thought there was a way to get to God by ignoring God. They forgot temporarily the lesson that there's no independent power in the world other than God. So how can you go against him and think that's going to work out okay? So we inherited that staff. That's the staff. In order to bring all humanity back to a full understanding and awareness of who he is. That's what it means to be the Jewish people. So at Passover, the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, are not celebrating our freedom. Freedom means, the word for freedom is chirut. We use chirut. It's not license. Charut means engraved. It's engraved in stone. The tablets were charutim, were engraved. We're here to leave being slaves from Paro, to be the Bechor of the Almighty, to be the Bechor of God. And that means it's our job to teach the world what Torah has to say and how to build a better world. That's our job. So as we're approaching Passover, We have to remember that's the essence. You can get lost up in all the details. It's easy to get lost up in details. And it's our job, the Bechor, to get above the details, to explain to everybody why the details are there. That's our job. But if we forget about it and we don't know about it, then the world is going to suffer. So, in this time of being forced not to get lost in the details, it's going to be so complicated to clean and prepare the seders. Everything is going to be pared down to the minimum this year. And when we're paring it down to the minimum and not getting distracted by massive cleaning and scrubbing and inviting 100 guests and making all the fancy meals and dishes, all we have to worry about is our matzah, our maror, mention Pesach, read the Haggadah, the 4 questions, drink the 4 cups of wine. Not a lot to really prepare for. And now we're forced not to prepare. אני 100 מטר מהבית. מה? אתה צריך לתעד. למה אני צריך? לתעד. לתעד, אני מדבר עם אנשים בחוץ לארץ. Send them regards. Wait, tell them, say hello. Hi, how are you? Are you making sure nobody's getting into trouble? No, I came back from work. Okay, you came back from work? כל הכבוד. You're the rescue guy. He was worried about me. Worried about why I'm walking around and why am I documenting it. I said, I'm talking to you guys out there. I'm doing my job as the Bechor. Here come some more guys. Alright, so that's something for y'all to think about. Are you still there, Suzanne? Miss you guys. I had some people that were part of my community in Toronto when I was a rabbi there. My Talmidim student. Suzanne, if you're still there, yeah. Suzanne used to come to my class faithfully every Shabbat. Okay, here's an emergency ambulance. All right, so my bracha for all of you is that we take this opportunity the next 2 weeks. We're coming up to Rosh Chodesh, the new month, 2 weeks before Passover. Lots of time to rethink who we are and doubling up our commitment, those of us who are Jewish, part of the nation of... חנות אוכל? מוכרים מצות בזה? זה שוטף. לפני Pesach. Okay. They've opened up the synagogue to be a food distribution center here to make it easier for people. So that I think they're giving away the food. They do that in the synagogue here, so anybody who needs supplies can come and take them if they haven't got money. All right, those are people thinking about what's important. What's our job? Our job is to remember, Laheti mituvo lezulato. God created the world to bestow His goodness to those other than Himself, and that's who we are. That's what the nation of Israel is supposed to be. We're supposed to be a light to the nations, to serve as an example of how God wants us to live. And my tefillah, my prayer, is that all the Jewish people come to that realization as quickly as possible, so that we can really unite with the rest of the world and bring Mashiach very soon in our days this year. So shalom, shalom, everybody. Love you all, and thank you all for your support during these difficult times. And I'll be sending out a newsletter, God willing, tomorrow. So if you're not on our newsletter, our email newsletter, put your email address in the comments down below. And you can see the laundry's hanging up here. It's all dry. Put your comments down there. And I know some people are buying olive oil to send to friends and relatives around the world who are stuck at home. It's a beautiful thing to do. And shalom, shalom, until the next